reach out, touch the fear. It is always there. Put on this coat of black. There ain't no going back. In the tower, you can bring your pain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Tower Podcast, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Andrew.
And I am Daniel.
And today, once again, big surprise, we'll be talking about the Wheel of Time. Before we get further into it, do you want to go ahead and hit us with that nice and sexy spoiler warning?
Absolutely, Andrew. So, as anyone who is currently reading the series is aware, or anyone who has finished, the nuptials of the two characters that we are talking about in this particular episode do happen about halfway through the series, but their relationship and the sort of matters therein definitely span the entire series. So if you have not yet made it all the way through A Memory of Light, you should probably turn back now and listen to this particular episode at a different time, because we're going to be mentioning things that happen all the way from the very first book in the series all the way through the very last book in the series. You've been warned.
Yes. Oh, yes, you have. So, I think we teased it in the last episode and teased it on Discord that we were going to be doing a kind of style-ish episode that we kind of haven't done. I mean, we've always done like topical episodes and then book reviews and that kind of thing. And this is the first part of what's going to be a fairly ongoing, at least until we cover everything. I don't want to call it a series because they're not going to be back to back, but someone
a recurring series.
Yeah, a recurring series. Yeah, let's go with that. That's right. So we've seen interest from some of the listeners about us talking about the relationships in the Wheel of Time, and we all got together and talked and decided that it would be a good idea to do that. And the way we're doing that is we will do character reviews or analysis, whatever, on the characters involved in a relationship, not necessarily back to back. We might do one and then a couple weeks later do the next and then do the episode like we're going to be doing today. But after all the characters involved in relationship have been analyzed and talked about independently, we'll do an episode talking about their relationship. So if you guys remember way back, we did an episode titled A Man Alone, where we analyzed the character of Alan Mandragoran.
Mm-hmm.
And just 2 weeks ago, we did an episode on El Nynaeve Tialmera Mandragoran. So this
Say that
episode
10 times fast.
Oh, yeah. So this episode is going to be analyzing and talking about the relationship between Nynaeve and Lan.
Indeed.
Probably one of the most favorite relationships throughout the entire series.
Yes.
Because everybody loves Lan. A lot of people come to love Nynaeve if they don't, like her from the start.
Certainly.
And they have this relationship and the way they interact that kind of makes you, even if by some miracle you didn't care for either of the characters, I think most people would still really enjoy their relationship and the dynamics that they have.
Certainly. I think that's actually pretty safe to say.
Oh, yeah. So, these two characters, of course, first meet each other in Amon's field, where Lan, of course, arrived with Moraine, who he is a warder to, and Nynaeve at the time, of course, being the village wisdom. And we all know that she goes around giving young men coins to ask them for money, which is very suspect. And ultimately,
to ask them for information. Not money.
After the Trolloc attack on... Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
My brain is like half frazzled, guys, so please bear with me as you normally have to anyway.
It's all good.
But, so, and then after the Trolloc attack on Winter Night, we see Moraine and Lan urging Perrin and Matt and Rand that they have to leave, that we've got to go, that the shadow is after you boys, and I intend to find out why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Egwene pops in, and she's like, "You're going nowhere without me. I've always wanted to see the world."
Where you going?
Um,
Nowhere.
and so our group of 5 at the time leaves,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not too long after we find out after they're in
It's
Barillon.
actually 6.
Is it 6?
Because Tom shows up and he's also leaving with them.
Oh yeah, that's right. How could I forget about Tom? Sorry, Tom.
We
But
really want to
so
know
they,
who's playing you.
yeah, we do.
Speaking of
Um,
which, we did actually get a casting announcement this week, which we can talk
oh yeah,
about later, which I totally thought was going to be Tom, but was not. But anyway, continuing, yes, the 6 of them leave Emmons Field.
yes. And we find out after they've reached Barillon that it wasn't too much longer after they left that the good old Village Wisdom noticed that people she had been watching over her entire life were gone. She wasn't really worried that the Glee Man was gone because they come and go.
Certainly.
But that wicked, wicked Aes Sedai that she didn't like from day one has left as well.
Correct.
So Nynaeve, while the rest of the women's circle is arguing or talking about who should go, decides, screw it, I'm not going to wait forever. I'm going to go and follow them. And much to the surprise of Lan, she found them by tracking them
Correct.
all the way to Barillon.
Which, of course, he was certain, as who he is and what he does, and being so good at it, and putting in so much effort, that no one was going to be able to track them. In fact, he's actually somewhat convinced that the Shadow won't even be able to track them, which is a solid statement to go ahead and be able to say.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because Lan at the same time is impressed and incredibly perturbed.
Yes.
But we don't get the comment from Nynaeve that I love until after Shadar Logoth, where they leave Barillon, they wind up being chased and tracked down by Trollocs. After they, because it Tarn Ferry before or after Barillon?
Tarn Ferry is well after, or well
Okay.
before Barillon.
Okay, I was just making sure that I didn't skip over that part as far as the Trolloc chasing them. But so they find out they're being chased by a couple bands of Trollocs, and Lan and Moraine have this ominous, we have no choice but to go there. Where else could we go? And thus the readers are introduced to the seemingly interesting historical but incredibly horrifying Shadar Logoth.
Indeed. Eridol.
Yep, good old Eridol. Which shows you that greed is cancerous.
Yes,
And we're
yes,
going to
it
put it
is.
at that. For any more information on that, please see our very, very early episode on Pat and Fane. Until we do an episode on Shadar Logoth.
Indeed.
But
Also, to look at that, please see our very interesting 24-hour news cycle in the United States of America. But anyway, continue.
Everybody just starts disappearing in the mist.
It'll happen.
Yeah. So our group of 7 now, because Nynaeve does much in the same way Egwene refused to not go. Nynaeve does as well, but her motives, she claims, and I fully believe they are her motives, are to watch over and ensure the safety of the Edmund Fielders that are compelled to travel with Moraine now.
Correct, because Nynaeve actually tracks them to Barillon.
Mm-hmm.
She meets up with them in Barillon, and then goes off and gets, when they get separated, Lan continues to be perturbed because she's really still ridiculously good at tracking. But they have this kind of fun little contest between the two of them that is an enjoyable read.
Oh, yes. It's a very, very enjoyable read. But So while they're in Shadar Logoth, night begins to fall. They think that they're going to be safe because even Shadow Spawn won't go in. However, the Shadow Spawn and Murdrawl are mushed into Shadar Logoth
Yes, they are
by, at the
forced
time,
in.
an unknown motivator.
Yes. Though
But
they do sort of seem to be kind of understanding that it would be that the only entity that would be capable of that is one of the Forsaken or the Dark One himself. So they have some idea of what's forcing them in, but again, they have not seen it, not really, and they don't know what it is.
yeah. So during
But
this attack, they try to stay together, but the disgusting, greedy, misty creature born from Androl's greed, Mashadar,
Mashadar.
winds up splitting them up as it cannot even be touched lest you suffer a fate worse than death.
Yep.
And thus our newly formed intrepid D&D party of 7 is forced to break the number one rule of D&D and split the party.
No.
So Ran and Matt and Tom are together, and they find their way onto, is it the Sea Spray or Sea Mist? Bale
The
Dolmens?
spray, yeah.
The spray? Okay. The Bale Dolmens watercraft, Moraine and Lan are split apart, and they're wandering around outside trying to find everybody else. Perrin and Egwene are split apart and make it to the other side of the river, and Nynaeve, for the time being, is all on her lonesome until she picks up on tracks. And
Yep.
once again, tracks her way to land and actually watches from the woods for a little bit. And I think as she emerges, Lan notices that she's there. And he's more perturbed this time. And she's like, I followed you. And he's like, how could you follow me? And she's like, the most basic girl in Amon's field could follow your tracks. It's so obvious. Which
Yep.
is
Which is a
hilarious.
lie.
I mean, it's a lie, but it's just hilarious.
It's totally a lie, but it
you
is a funny comment.
Can you imagine Lan's face at the moment? Like, the fuck you mean? You know, the Marines just probably
Yes.
sitting there thinking, like, the old blood.
Yeah, as she always does. She's just sitting there being like, it runs strong in Emmons Field.
Oh, yeah. But, so from there, Nynaeve is with the Aes Sedai that she can't stand, that she blames for this entire predicament.
Correct.
Which, from her perspective, isn't wrong. The boys would have never left Amon's field had she not showed up, but there's also a good chance
Yeah,
that
they'd also
the book would
all
have
be
been
dead.
Yeah, the book would have been, I mean, the series would have been like 1.5 books long, and the last line would be, and the entire world was destroyed.
Yes.
But and it's
Which actually makes you kind of think that, again, I mean, we get a number of like male channelers, we get a number of false dragons between 3,000 years ago when Luther and Telamon lived, and then all the way to, Randall Thor. There are plenty of men who claim to be the dragon and men who can channel and whatnot. It is an interesting thing to think about how many times perhaps the pattern has tried to weave out a dragon and they've just failed and they've just died. So it's like, all right, cool. So that was a try. Now we're going to weave out the next one. So how many other dragon stories were only a book long? It's an interesting thought.
yeah,
Or were there none, and the only two that actually are dragons are Luz Theron and Rand? That's also a thought.
yeah.
Anyway.
It very well could be. Who knows?
Who knows? I bet you Robert Jordan does.
Oh yeah.
And possibly Brandon Sanderson.
Oh yeah. I would imagine Branderson is never know. I mean, he would have had access to all the notes.
Correct.
All the notes. Because from the first book, there was guaranteed a note. All of this is crucial for further in the series when they go to cleanse Sidene and
Indeed.
all this stuff to help link back the shit that's happened in the past. But
absolutely.
So for the most part of this, the travels after this, it focuses on Rand and Matt and Tom, and then we get a lot of stuff from Perrin and Egwene, with scatterings of Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine traveling uh, all the way through Caitlin. And there's a lot of uh, what appears to be, I don't want to say shameless, but not necessarily the most hidden off-screen flirting that happens between Lan and Nynaeve. Um, that culminates all well, I don't want to say culminates because it definitely doesn't, but as far as the eye of the world is concerned, kind of culminates into a scene where, you know, Lan basically tells Nynaeve that he's married to his fight against the Shadow, that all he could give to her was as wedding dowry would be a burial wreath, that marrying him and being in love with him would bring her nothing but sadness, and he gives her his signet ring, and
Mm-hmm.
which from this point forward she will wear on a necklace. She is
She is
never
never
without it.
without it.
And it would be infinitely more pissed if you tried to take that than the serpent ring she gets later on.
Oh yeah, she don't really give a shit about that
Yeah,
one.
which we yeah, which we get to see the far softer, more I guess romantic side of Nynaeve. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. She is a 25-year-old woman. Um, you know, everybody has a romantic side, and we get to see this kind of softer side of Nynaeve because after the conversation, Nynaeve essentially breaks down, and
Mm-hmm.
Moraine, of like always, is fucking watching from afar.
Yep.
And she
And it
knows,
pisses Nynaeve off even more. Not she's like, I don't even really care that I'm crying. I care that this bitch is seeing me.
yeah. Which at that point, Moraine essentially knows, and she reveals later on that she pretty much felt that eventually, her relationship with Lan is never going to be the same as it was. Not that they had a romantic relationship, but
Yeah.
that his heart, and she can feel it through the bond, that his heart, whether he wants to admit it to her or not, does now belong to Nynaeve, and that much in Moraine's way of knowing things, she knows that, well, they're probably, he's going to go for her. She's never going to give up on him. They'll probably be together. Um, and after the events that follow the siege, well, not the siege, but Rand and friends conquering the Stone of Tyr. After Moraine takes her trip through the red stone doorway, that Terangrial, she comes back out and, of course, sets things up for Lan's bond to be transferred to Meryl,
Marililla.
Marililla, so that because she has the best track record of keeping warders alive that have lost their Aes Sedai, literally trying to fuck them back into happy health, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and ultimately,
I mean, it'd
she
work
does
on
it.
me. No, I'm just kidding.
But ultimately, she does it in the hopes that eventually Lan's bond can be passed to the person that she can tell he wants to have it and who more than wants to have it. And as we find out
Yes,
later in the
because on
series,
some level, it actually seems like she would have done that before um that she would have made arrangements to do that with Nynaeve if all of these events hadn't happened so quickly. Because of course, Nynaeve, like they're together for a little while, but they actually get separated fairly regularly in the series. And so she doesn't really have that much opportunity to go ahead and change her plans and have, her and Marililla and Nynaeve and all of these different characters who are important in this particular decision all in the same place to make it actually happen. And so she ends up kind of just following through on the plan that she had before. I feel more like or more because she actually didn't even have the ability to stop it rather than she still thought it was the right thing to do,
oh yeah, I mean,
if that makes
yeah,
sense.
and she sets us up not only because she has this long-standing friendship relationship with Lan and wants him to survive, but she knows that it ultimately sets things up to where Nynaeve can have the bond with Lan, and she knows based off of how Lan feels towards Nynaeve that if he's going to remain alive after suffering the recoil from losing his Aes Sedai, that Nynaeve
It's
is
gonna take
Nynaeve
Nynaeve.
is the best chance at making that happen. But
Correct.
after the scene on the docks where Moraine tumbles through the redstone doorway with Lanfear, I don't believe Lan and Nynaeve are around each other again until until he's sent to Nynaeve while she's in Ebu Dar by
Correct.
Egwene.
And they meet in Ebu Dar when Lan saves her from
Yeah,
drowning.
which is all caused by Mogideon using Balefire.
Fuck her.
Yep, which Moradin may have intentionally, may have unintentionally fucked up her aim.
Yes, indeed. It is hard to say. Also, I love how
Yeah.
whether it was intentional or not, Moradin is one of the reasons that Nynaeve is so much more of a character later on. Because, of course, at this point is also when she overcomes her block. And suddenly, Nynaeve is, I mean, she was already a player in the story. I mean, anybody who says that she wasn't before that is foolish. But she wasn't nearly as formidable, just given that she had this this hamstring, if you will, that was, I can only channel if I'm mad.
Oh, yeah. So she does get rid of the block. And like we talked about last time, she blows open the portion of the cabin that she's stuck in as she's basically passing out. And just in the nick of time, Lan pulls her from the river back up on land. Duh. With a D. But probably
True.
also Lan himself. I mean, it does happen
Indeed.
very, very shortly after. So Nynaeve freshly rescued, finally reunited with Lan, immediately swoons completely over him, tells him that she is, now that she has
Never
him,
gonna let him
that
go.
she is not going to let him go. We will be married this night. Because it's actually kind of comical because she is acting full swoon, kind of stereotypical high school girly over Lan as an Aes Sedai in front of everybody that's there. And she has to recompose herself.
Yep. And on some level, she
Yeah.
doesn't even care. I mean, she does, because she does recompose herself, but she's also like, you know what, fuck it. I don't actually care. This is all I actually really care about. This is what's important.
So I believe it is actually that evening or night that the two of them make the trip out to a sea folk ship to be.
Well, so, okay. Remember what she was doing when she actually got attacked. She is out to go and negotiate with the sea folk in the first place, and her boat is on the way to theirs when it gets hit by Mogideon's balefire. So they actually just continue their trip. She composes herself on the boat. Everybody gets ready to go do what they were originally planning on doing. And then as part of that negotiation, she ends up just tacking on this wedding ceremony under the Athan traditions on the Athan boat that she was already sent to go negotiate.
You're right.
With.
So it's essentially right after this that the two of them are married, and it's actually, for our knowledge, this is the first time we see Lan smile, because he smiles at Nynaeve when she's insistent they're going to get married, and he's essentially like, how could I say no to you? Which is really nice to see, because Lan has been like mopey, like, for good reason, but just really down in a really bad place for the last several books now.
Yes. I think it's actually just the full last book. But he also he didn't exist in that book. So we haven't really seen him be mopey. It's just these sort of understanding that he is, like, knowing based on the rules of the universe that he is absolutely not in a good place. And of course, he spent the entire last book riding towards Marililla in Saladar, literally fighting everything on his way. He has not stopped, but he has also killed just about every, like, shadow spawn or probably wild animal predator or, blah 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 that's been in his
Oh
path
yeah.
on the way there.
Um.
So he gets there and he's not
Yeah.
doing so hot. And she actually ends up having to heal him before they hunker down to bedding
Yeah.
him back to life.
So that is a
Uh,
part of the Athena Mier marriage custom. So for the sea folk or
what is part of it?
the bedding him down.
I was talking about Marililla doing it, not
Oh, my bad.
Nynaeve. Yeah.
Well, anyway,
So now this is Nynaeve's
yeah,
opportunity to go ahead and wedding night him.
yeah. So for the sea folk or the Athan Mier, uh, because marriage is designed to be egalitarian, and that's because of
Yes.
how frequently ranks change within the sea folk culture. Whenever a couple gets
Correct.
married, the wife or whoever may be their husband's superior on board the ship for 1 year, and the next year it could have swapped. So because of
Correct.
that, they keep the structure balanced by just going with the blanket statement of whoever is in charge in public submits to their spouse in private. So
Correct.
Nynaeve is in charge in public.
Which they never actually go ahead and truly describe what that means for Lan being in charge in private, but they do make strong
Yeah,
suggestions.
I think
And
he's
the funniest part is that Nynaeve is actually a little bit angry, and I mean, not angry like true anger, but she does actually make a number of comments about how frustrating it is that Lan will never take advantage of that. And she just wants him to just once, or, maybe more than once, so that she sort of has that over him. Because she, of course, takes care of, or takes advantage. And I put that in quotes because, in a lot of ways, advantage is a strong word for what she does. But she does use her position over him to tell him what he does or does not need to do, in front of other people, or at least vetoing his uh, advice, if nothing else, relatively often. I mean, it doesn't happen a ton, but it definitely happens more than a few times. And she actually makes a comment at some point that she's like, and yet he'll never do it in the bedroom. And you kind of laugh at
oh
that
yeah,
because you're like, in what world do you actually want him to do that?
oh yeah. And with the sea folk tradition,
Because you'd be livid.
yeah. So that night, both of them disappear because it is tradition with the Athena Mier to they have to consummate the relationship on the first night, or it's considered invalid.
Correct.
So the next day, we see that Nynaeve winds up being in the carriage with Elaine and the other women, and Lan is
Mm-hmm.
around Matt, I believe.
Matrim
Yeah,
and the
and the
band,
band,
the few
and
people that he has taken from the
yeah,
band.
and Lan makes the comment that the Sea Folk have very interesting uh, marriage traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, we see that a little bit of the conversation between Elaine and Nynaeve, where Elaine's like, "I had no idea that they had such interesting customs, and that's very interesting on how it works." So the women were all obviously having their conversation about it, and as far as Lan is concerned, he's had his conversation about it as well. Because right after he makes the comment to Matt, I believe Matt makes a comment about, who would want to marry her or who can handle someone that's so bossy as her. And Lan just goes full deadpan at Matt and is like, surely you are not saying anything disparaging about my wife. And Matt's like, shit, man, fuck.
Which is
No,
fucking
I'm not. No, I'm not. I
hilarious.
swear. She's a beautiful
Because
woman.
Matt is definitely one of those people who would stand there and be like, yeah, I'm totally saying something disparaging about your wife, except that he's talking to Lan, who's fucking terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
He does not want to go ahead and make an enemy of Lan, which, I mean, like, he wouldn't, because, of course, we all actually know from being intelligent readers that while Lan certainly does not want Matt to talk shit about Nynaeve, I'm certainly not saying that he is like, oh yeah, no, talk shit as much as you want. He does say it somewhat in jest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because he's not actually gonna murder. If Matt had said, yeah, I'm a little talking shit about Nynaeve, he might get like a black eye at worst, but he's not gonna get murdered.
Oh, yeah.
But of course, at the same time, if there was anybody in that carriage who could murder Matrim Cawthon on sight, it would be Lan Almedrigor.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So, but we do see, because so they have the Seafolk marriage conducted, but by virtue of Lan being the last crown king of Malkir and being Malkeri, it does bring in the Malkeri marriage tradition. So of course,
Correct.
Nynaeve immediately becomes the queen of Malkir. Thus,
Correct.
her new full name of T. Almera Mandragorn, L. Nynaeve, sorry. Because the L is the honorific for her being the queen from the Malkiri tradition. Just like the Al is
Correct.
to Lan, his honorific for being the king.
T is also of the Malkir tradition, though it is not strictly Malkir. That is a Borderlands thing, of which Malkir is
Yep.
one.
And I believe the Almera, the Al to the Mera, is done because she does take on her husband's last name.
Actually, her last name is
Why do I
Almira.
keep getting that wrong?
So
I thought there was something that
I
she
don't
took
know
on
why.
because she took on his last name.
I think it's the T.
Is it the T? Is that the
believe
Borderlands
that
tradition?
is the
when you
T.
take on your
I
spouse's last
believe
name,
that
you
is
get the T.
the
Okay,
Borderlands
that's it.
tradition.
I knew it was there. I just keep forgetting her actual last
Yes.
name is Almera, or was.
Correct, because at one point she is Nynaeve Almira.
That's right. So
it is not until later that she becomes L Nynaeve T Almira, but she is always Nynaeve Almira. That does not change.
correct. So from that point forward, like we talked about, excuse me, in the episode on Nynaeve, she wears the Kisane, the small dot on her forehead, hers, of course, being red because she is actively married. Assuming, given Lan's 21-year age difference, that there is a very strong probability that he will pass before she does eventually while she's still alive, and he does pass, that will change to white as she will be a widow.
Correct. And of course, not only the age difference, because she'll actually get longer with him, presumably. Because he's a warder, and it does seem to have some effect on his age, though not nearly as much as channeling has an effect on her age, which is going to be far longer than what he stays alive.
Yeah.
So she has set herself up to lose her husband, but of course, that's fine in a lot of ways, because they will have a very long and happy life together. Which is, I guess that was the first spoiler we've really hit for the end. They both live through the last battle, so they live happily ever after. And
so there is also the tradition in Malkir of granting a person's first lover or Carnera. Yeah, let's go with Carnera. Special rights and authority over them while they are in that relationship. So with
Mhm.
Lan being Nynaeve's first lover, she is his Carnera.
Yep.
And we get back to the braid again because the intended, they braid the hair into a long rope called a Deori, which is so they keep it long enough to where they can hold it in their hands, and that gives the Carneria total control over them in the bedroom. So right
Correct.
now, Lan has his own historical tradition and the sea folk tradition to tell him to take charge in the bedroom.
Correct.
So cue Nynaeve's frustration when he will not do it.
Well, I mean, okay, to be fair, she does say that she's like, he is in charge and that's fine, but she's like, but he never trumps me.
Oh yeah.
And it's frustrating. And I look at that and I'm like, again, on one hand, hilarious because if we're being honest, and we try to be, there are definitely some women and men, let's be honest, who actually want a very dominating personality with who they are
Yeah, there's nothing
betting.
wrong with being a sub or a bottom.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it is kind of funny that we have noticed as a species that not in often some of the most dominant people outside of the bedroom are actually interested in being not the most dominant people and actually being, distinctly submissive when they're not out in
Well, I can
public.
imagine it's
And
almost like
so,
taking a break from having to be the one to call the shots. You get that kind of break.
for example, and I think that is actually part of the reason that it happens. I agree.
So it's kind of like that scene from
But it is kind of
kind of like
humorous.
that scene from Family Guy where Chris is being spanked by Cleveland's wife after the whole like the Cleveland show thing, and then there's like some Japanese guy standing there, and he's like, "By day, I am important businessman, but at night, I am bad boy."
Yes. That kind of thing where again it does get kind of tiresome being in charge all the time. And so that often, or at least that is a thing that people often point to as like, yeah, so it would be good to not be that. It's not terribly surprising that these types of people don't necessarily want to be in charge with their significant other or whatever, or just sex in general. And so it's kind of humorous on two levels. One, you can look at it that Nynaeve is always looking for Lan to overstep his bounds, or at least, on some level, because he can't really overstep his bounds in the bedroom because he's supposed to be dominant. But she's looking for him to go ahead and overstep his bounds so that she can call him out for it, and he never does. Also, there's another layer of that where you can sort of imagine that maybe Nynaeve is into light choking or whatever kind of like dominant behavior she wants Lan to do, and he's like, "No, I won't do that. Deal with it yourself,
I mean, I think
woman."
in a lot of
And
ways, like with Lan being her first lover, she's now going through the what do I like? She's got to try
right?
things
No,
out, figure
exactly.
out, do I like this? Do I not like
Yes.
this? And I guarantee there's a
And
well,
who knows whether Lan is or is not actually really following through with trying everything she
yeah,
wants.
because he's obviously a man with experience, especially
Mm-hmm.
after his bond changed hands, and
Yep.
you know,
Because we all know that Marililla is a woman of vast
oh yeah,
experience. And so if he's been with Marililla, then he just by association has some serious
oh yeah, because
experience.
guarantee she would have tried many things to make him happy.
Yep.
Um,
Because one of the things that we didn't necessarily talk about, which is worth mentioning now that we're into this, is that when Egwene finds out about Lan and the fact that the uh, that the bond has been passed and that he's now in Saladar, or really just outside of Saladar, as the case may be. She asks how it's going, and Marililla's like, not great. Like, it's not bad. I mean, he's not actively running around killing things or trying to run into the Borderlands to or to, you know, straight to Shale Gold to fight the Dark One or anything, but like, I don't really feel like I'm making that much progress, which means that she was trying everything. You know that she's been trying everything. She has not been sitting idly by while Lan's not really getting better, which means he's done fucked. So he definitely has some knowledge about what's up. And Nynaeve's like, yeah, but I've never done this before.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting dynamic with them at this point as well.
So, I mean, ultimately, like every other issue in the entire series is going to come down to communication, which hopefully they are a lot
Right.
better with in private than they are with, I don't know, everybody else in the fucking series. But
Or hopefully they're better at communication. Well, no. See, this is the important part. They are absolutely better at communication than, for example, Gawain is with communication to anyone. Because holy crap, does that boy not talk to anybody about anything ever and get himself into so many issues because of it.
yeah. But so after this, you kind of get this pseudo typical what you'd expect um, of a marriage, but you got to look at like who the married parties are. In all honesty,
Yes.
um,
Because they're very interesting on their own. So their marriage was never actually going to be just a normal marriage.
So you've got Nynaeve being pulled to do her Aes Sedai duties, and it's not until is it Knife of Dreams when she takes the full actual Aes Sedai test, passes, and immediately goes and gets the bond from Mariella.
Yes, so it is actually a Knife of Dreams, which we actually just talked about
Which is
this
probably
last
why
week.
I was able to remember it. But
Indeed.
score one for Andrew. So at that point, Land officially becomes Nynaeve's warder. And
correct. Because up until this point, Marililla did absolutely, without a doubt, give him carte blanche to go and be Nynaeve's warder in activity. So he has absolutely acted as her warder all the way from finding her in Abu Dar up until when she actually officially gets to say yay or nay on his duties, given that he is her warder. But he was acting as her warder all the way up from the time that he saved her life.
oh yeah, definitely. So the rest of the things that Lan and Nynaeve, like I actively thought Nynaeve to avoid saying Moraine, and it was like
and then said
reverse
it anyway.
psychology for my brain to mouth communications. So bad, guys. I tried so hard, and I got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter.
But in the end, by the way, small tangent here. I don't know how many other Magic the Gathering players there are out there. But if you have been keeping up with Magic the Gathering, they put out a set that was War of the Spark, during this last year. It's not the most recent set, but it is one of the ones that came out this past year. And they have been doing this thing where they've added sort of like trailers or like videos as far as sort of lore and like to get people hyped about the new set that's coming out, whatever it may be. And the one for War of the Spark included a like very like eerie, almost acoustic female led vocals of that particular song, and it is amazing. So if you have not seen it and you want to just look up, War of the Spark trailer, there's a video and there's that song in it, and it's incredible. So there you go. For anyone who appreciates that song already, it's a dope ass version.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
Moraine and Lan, I mean,
see,
Nynaeve and
you can blame me for that one because I probably did it.
No, I did it on purpose.
How dare you mock me on this, the day of Lan and Nynaeve's wedding?
You can't stop now.
I can't. You heard me almost say it again.
I did. It almost happened.
So
anyway, continue. On this day of Lan and Nynaeve's wedding.
So from this point, it's more, they still have their moments, but it's more just a focus on getting what needs to be done and getting ready for the last battle for Tarmangaiden. And Nynaeve finally resolves to allow, quote unquote, allow Lan to pursue his calling, his fight against the Shadow. And like we talked about in the episode with on Nynaeve, she does let open a traveling portal for him to go to the Borderlands, and puts his ass at the exact opposite end of the Borderlands he wants to be, over by the Aerith Ocean and World's End, and proceeds to travel from city to city, town to town that he will come across that are remotely close to his path, and act, not only as his loving wife, but as Queen of Malkir. And trying to muster anybody, because she has forced him essentially to accept anybody that comes to him and says they want to ride with him. She's forced him to accept it. And she
has made him make a promise that he will take on any and everyone who comes to him and says, I want to fight for Malkir too.
Yeah. So yeah, because it's technically in Saldea. That is the landmass that is still a part of Saldea, under Saldean control. And he has to get to Tarwin's Gap, where Tarmageddon is going to start. He has to ride about 2/3. So the distance is equivalent to 2/3 of the distance between Tyr and Tarwin's Gap. It's a long fucking way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a long
So along the way, he encounters Bulin, who is waiting for him, and he attempts to leave him behind, but he's fine. They are approached by another 3 riders when they get to the plain of lances, and they join with Lan. And he eventually accepts them into his company, and makes all of them take an oath that they will not reveal his identity, and they disguise themselves as a caravan. Then they reach Silverwall Keeps, where there's a gathering of thousands and many Malkeri present, as well as groups from all the other Borderlander nations. And he almost makes it through without being noticed when Prince Kasil Normaga calls out to Lan and halts him. And his disguise is broken. And that's where we find out that Nynaeve, figuring that he would be in hiding, told them to watch out for Mandarb, because Lan would never disguise Mandarb. And she was fucking right. She's got her husband pegged down to a T. So
I'm sorry, dude. You can't say that, because he's the one who gets to be dominant. So she's definitely not.
I was like, where's he going with this? Son of a bitch. I walked right into that. She understands her husband very well. There.
But it's all good.
Son of a bitch.
There you go.
So it's at this point when Lan's like, all right, look, there's no way I'm going to be able to disguise with thousands of people follow me. I'm not going to break my promise. Fine. Let the golden crane fly for Tarmageddon, and anyone who wishes to follow can. And by the time Lan makes it to Tarwin's Gap, he has an army of around 12,000 strong. So if that don't prove love from your wife, and your queen, I don't know what does.
What is love? 12,000 people for Tarman. Gaidon.
So,
Oh, man.
and then,
We're just going to pull out all the songs today.
so then there's, then Tarmageddon starts, and Lan is trying to focus on fighting, but I imagine he does have thoughts wondering and hoping that Nynaeve is okay, because I can't remember if he's aware that Nynaeve is going into Shao Ghul with Rand.
He is not aware as far as I know. I think that he does not know about that particular plan because he's actually on the forefront of the fighting.
Wow.
And therefore ends up going ahead and being a little out of the loop of sort of the other moves that are going on. But because also I don't know if he would actually allow that. I mean, he does know that it's important. I'm certainly not saying that Lan is not willing to make sacrifices, because, of course, at the very end, he's actually willing to sacrifice himself for the cause. But at the same time, he also does seem to be a little bit more flippant with his own life than he does with just about anybody else's.
So it is during all this fighting, as Lan and his forces, they keep being forced back by endless wave after wave after wave of Trollocs. Um, Ultimately, the Ashaman, Narishma creates a gateway where they escape to an icy mountain to try to help. Actually, no, one of his companions dies. One of Lan's friends dies, and they leave him on the icy mountain to
Correct.
preserve him until they can bury him later. The army's getting fatigued, and Agomar Jagad, who at the time is under compulsion from.
Yes, though he and no one else except for the
They
person who
don't know,
compulsed them
but
knows.
tells Lan that he has to completely withdraw from Tarwin's Gap and go back through Shinar, which Lan is incredibly unhappy with leaving Malkir again and insists on staying. And that's when Agomar's like, "You're selfish. You're a leader of all these men." Well, that he is now a leader of all the men, because at this point, Agomar has realized that something's off. He's not making the smartest decisions, um, and gives command over to Lan. So,
Well, and remember that it was actually someone else. So Lan has been noticing this about Agilmar, that he's making some strange calls that don't totally make sense. And Lan is not interested in going ahead and taking command away from Agilmar because he doesn't really uh sorry, that's not true. Baldir is the one that he talks to about it. So Lan actually does notice that this is a problem. That it's actually or that Agomar is making some bad calls and they need to look into his into why that's happening. And he goes to another one of Agomar's captains and basically is like, "Hey, talk to me about a number of these other things." And that's when they together realize that Agomar is compulsed. And so Agomar hands over sort of dominion of the whole army to Lan because he's like, "I
correct.
can't do this. I fucked up."
Ultimately, Lan is pushed back from Tarwin's Gap. But Rand shows up and gives him the now remade crown of Malkir, and he also has one for Nynaeve as well. And that's where we get this kind of heartwarming interaction between Rand and Lan. We've had several, but this one's really good because Rand tells Lan that even though Elaine has taught him how to be a ruler, it was Lan that taught him how to stand. And so Rand's like, it's almost like his final, like, thank you so much for what you've done. And you've basically
Yep.
made me the man I am today. Um,
Well, and it's also interesting because, of course, when it comes right down to it, uh, Rand never knew his father. And I say that in exactly the way of the person who made him, the person who helped conceive of Rand al'Thor. He never met that guy. That's Janduin the Aiel. But there are two men that have actually really been father figures to Rand. Now, one has been more of a father figure. I mean, Tam al'Thor is the one who raised Rand. And overall, Rand would consider him, just plain and simple as far as the words are concerned, his dad or his father. But there is a huge traumatic you know character initiating like forging and whatnot set of events that happens from the point where he leaves Emmons Field all the way up until Tarmangaiden. And Lan, while he has certainly not been there for all of it, really has been an incredibly influential figure in Rand's growth from the point where he stopped being around Tam all the way up until Tarmangaiden. And so the fact that he actually views him almost like a second father in some ways is not super surprising because they've been through a lot together. And so that's really like one of the moments where you get that payoff where it's like Rand knows that there are people in his life who made him who he is, and Lan is absolutely one of them. And so he gives him the crown. He tells him, hey, these people might have raised me. This might, be whatever, but I want to acknowledge that you had a lot to do with that as well. And it's beautiful little scene that we get, and it's one of the things that, like, separately, Rand actually gets a few of those scenes with each of them. Because while he's running around with Nynaeve, he also has a few different scenes like that, including the, dream for me, Nynaeve line, for example. Um, and he also gets a couple with Lan because, of course, we've already seen them up until this point that he's had a couple. And then this one is, huge. This one's major. And it's like the last hurrah that Rand thinks he gets with his friends before he's going to die.
Oh yeah. So eventually, after getting a Foxhead medallion that Galad had Berlin returned through one of the gateways, which I don't know why I ever forgot the phrase gateway and kept calling them traveling portals, but through a gateway.
Hey, you're just
Yeah.
using the Age of Legends name.
So Lan now has the Foxhead medallion, and after others have failed to kill Demon Dread, Lan decides to give it a try, and ultimately using the technique that he first spoke to Rand about in the Great Hunt, while he was training him in swordsmanship or
Correct.
swordplay or however you want to look at it. She's the sword and does kill Demon Dread by stabbing him through the throat. And at this point, everybody thinks Lan is dead,
Yep.
but the killing of Demon Dread does break the Shadow Army and strengthens the morale of the band.
Yes.
Or of the band and the Shanjan, the small force led by Matt. And then it's
Correct.
whenever Rand's voice booms over the battlefield and he reveals that Lan is not dead. And then Lan stands up and shows off the head of Demon Dread, which completely breaks the Shadow Army. His wound is healed
Correct.
by Narishma, the Ashaman, and after the events of the battle have concluded, Lan then travels into Thakandar to be reunited with Nynaeve, and it's then that for the first time he does wear the crown of Malkir, and Nynaeve wears her crown as the Queen of Malkir as well, and we get to see the royal the now well always been royal couple, but the royal couple that is now about to start rebuilding the nation they rule. So everything looks promising.
Correct. We actually see them
Yeah,
as rulers because up until this point, we've known that they were king and queen, but they've had nothing to be king and queen over. And this is the point where we actually see them have hope that they will, or really not even just hope, but like a sort of dedicated plan for what they will actually be ruling over.
yes, but
So,
we get it's a very wholesome relationship that is very
yes.
balanced. You know, there's no that doesn't look like one gains more than the other does. Um, it's a nice kind of example of love not being limited by age or background. Because Land, like I said earlier, he is
Yes.
decidedly 20 to 21 years, depending on birth month, older than Nynaeve. Um, and
Correct.
nobody even bats an eye about. Nobody even mentions the age difference between the two of them. And it's a very nice thing
Yeah.
because you see Nynaeve being very loyal and very defensive of Land and very caring and protective of Land, and you see the same from Land towards Nynaeve. Um, so, like you said,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think in the pre-recording, uh, that they definitely are one of the power couples of the Wheel of Time.
Yes. Very much so. And to be fair, I will also throw out there, while we're talking about it, you just mentioned that, they are very equal and whatnot. And I will say, with very, very rare exception, because there are a few that are intentionally unbalanced. I think that everybody in the Wheel of Time, like all of the relationships, or at least all of the ones that we overall care about, um, all of them feel that way. I don't think that I can think of one that's like a main character or somebody that sort of matters, where there's one person who really like seems to just be getting the short end of that particular stick. Actually, that's not true. Never mind.
Oh yeah,
Gawain and
yeah.
Egwene. I take it all back. I take it everything back. But I think that's like, one overall. I think that almost all of them are pretty balanced as far as that's concerned, because I think that Robert Jordan really did have a very good understanding of sort of what relationships are for and why they come about. And while we all know a relationship where one of them loves the other person more than the other person loves them, and they don't really complement each other that well, with characters this strong, it's hard to imagine any of them being okay with
True. A
that.
very good point.
So, but in any case, uh I agree. And one of the things that I actually really like about the story again is that idea that uh there are very few times where you actually hear about a relationship or anything along the like love lines in the Wheel of Time that anybody really questions, because this is a world where you don't need to define your relationship by anybody else's standards, and basically love is love. And so it's I think that Robert Jordan did a really good job, while not like necessarily making a statement, if you will, about what love should look like. I think he also just did a really good job of giving an example of a society and whatnot that doesn't care. Like, it doesn't matter whether you like people of the same sex. It doesn't matter whether you're in love and you have a 21-year age difference. It doesn't matter, this, that, or the other thing. As long as the two people are in love and there's no like, glaring or gross problem with it,
Oh yeah. Well,
then
what I
love is
really
love and
like
shut the
is
fuck up.
the meshing of cultures that they do in a lot of the relationships and a lot of the marriages. because you have obviously this one that meshes
Yes.
Malkeri tradition with the Sea Folk tradition. Then you have like with Rand, who has
Mm-hmm.
the mesh Andoran, well, Edmund Amon's field tradition with IL tradition, and then Edmund Amon's field tradition with
Yes.
like royal Andoran tradition, and then even then with regular Andoran tradition,
Correct.
which is what men would have been exposed to. Then you have
Yes.
Perrin and Fael.
Well, and the interesting thing is that like Min also ends up going ahead and uh presumably she's actually very well traveled as well, so she at least knows of a number of other traditions and such. So like he's also got that, but of course the biggest one is the Andoran to
Oh
Aiel,
yeah,
and
then
then
you have
as you were just about to
Perrin and
say,
Fael that have to mesh Saldaean tradition with Amon's field tradition slash Andoran. So, and those are just brief
yep,
examples. I mean, you have Bael Doman who winds up having to mesh his traditions with Shan traditions. Matt that has the mesh Andorn and Amon's field traditions
yep,
with his memory of how marriages and relationships have gone with a very, very royal
right,
Shan tradition. So there's a huge meshing of
yep,
cultures and marriages. I mean, you've got Moraine, who for the last almost forever, it seems, has had this very structured, this very almost formulaic lifestyle as an Aes Sedai. I mean, obviously, it's not like predictable, but and ultimately she winds up with a traveling gleeman who they're both going to be very familiar with the higher class and the noble marriage traditions from their time in Camelin from the Andoran tradition. But now you've got Tom who has been more than well cultured, who is extremely well traveled. The same thing with Moraine, who has been exposed to all these cultures and very well traveled. So there's no telling the dynamic that they're going to default to if there's really a nameable dynamic that they do default to.
correct,
So I
yeah,
mean, that's one of the things I like the most is just the meshing of cultures, and it's very reflective of how the real world works. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, there's no limit on who you fall in love with and who you marry, and ultimately, any couple that's made or any romantic relationship that's made, you're going to have to come to terms with and adjust to the differences in each person's background. And we see that adjustment period coming
yep,
because now Lan he's has to for the first time actually embrace the Malkeri tradition with the bolstering of now the Sea Folk tradition that his marriage was conducted in. And then like we see all the time with Perrin and
correct,
Fael about that's why it's almost like a very similar kind of thing between Nynaeve and Lan as it is between Perrin and Fael, because Perrin has always just been more of a gentle person, whereas Lan is very honorable, very noble, doesn't want to take advantage. And both of their wives want them to pin
mm-hmm.
them against the wall and tell them what's what in the bedroom. And we kind of we
Yep,
basically see it happen with Perrin. And I think eventually, of course, now that his fight against the Shadow is done and Malkir has been avenged and will be rebuilt, that's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of his oath fulfilled that is going to free Lan up to explore more of, okay, well, now that my oath is done, I live for Nynaeve and my nation. So it frees him up to focus a lot more on Nynaeve
yes,
and the son
and
that
of
they're
course, I
definitely going to have.
mean, and
Oh,
yes,
sorry.
exactly. And that was actually what I was going to mention is that now so well I you're fine. I was just sitting there being like, uh something that Lan probably never even remotely considered given his oath and given his fight and given the fact that he has never assumed he was going to live past a certain point. Now he can actually think about kids and then, go ahead and give those kids everything and all of that that he never even knew he would be able to do in the first place. and so that's a huge, thing that's going to change about their relationship dynamic and whatnot, as far as when they decide to and
Well, yeah,
have
because by the end
and
of the series,
raise their
he's
kids.
26, 27. I mean, not 26, 56, 57. Sorry. Yeah, she's like
I was going
26,
to say
27. He's,
she's like 26, 27.
56, 57 ish. Or I guess if she's 26, 27,
Yes.
then he's got to be 57, 58 because he does have about that year on her. But what?
47,
Really?
48.
Am I doing math wrong?
Well,
Oh,
that would be
shit.
21 years.
Because he was born in 753 and no, not in 7. Numbers are
So
destroying me. Yeah, 953.
953.
Yeah, so
So he's actually, and she was born in
974.
9.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
have the
so you're
count
totally
wrong.
right about
That's right.
21 years.
Yeah, he's
But
in his
yeah, so
40s.
he's
Yeah,
he's
my
in his
bad.
40s.
I was thinking like 953 to the year 1000. Oh, 50 years or so, and I just went the wrong way with the math. I had the right, but the intention was
Yeah.
there. The
No,
right
so
idea was
he's
there. It was just
under
poorly executed.
50.
All right,
Yes.
sue me.
I probably won't. But yeah. No, it's honestly, as stated, their relationship and Matt and Tuan are actually probably my favorite relationships throughout the entire series, because I, not the same as a lot of people, but sort of along the same lines. Um I absolutely have no problem with Maureen and Tom. I have no issue as far as them being together, as far as like any issues with age or dynamic or blah blah blah. But I will admit that I did not really see it coming, and I don't feel like they actually have nearly as much foundation as a lot of the other characters. That being said, um I do really like their relationship together, but not quite as much as Matt and Tuan and Nynaeve and Lan. And I think that the relationship between Lan and Nynaeve actually gives us some of the better passages of the book, as far as um, sort of love and relationships and natural human connection is concerned. Just because, again, they are so strong and formidable on their own, and yet you get all of these like amazingly gentle and romantic and um softening, kinds of passages between the two of them, and with anybody else that they're talking about the other person with. And so it really does do such a lot to deepen their characters through their relationship, which I think is an amazing way to do that. Robert Jordan was a master of like using different, um I don't know what the word is necessary, different avenues of describing and deepening different things, as we've talked about on this podcast. For example, like the glass columns, one of the best ways to go ahead and give you plot exposition for an entire nation. The relationship between Nynaeve and Lan being one of the best ways to humanize each of their characters,
Oh
things
yeah,
like that. I
amazing plot
love the
device.
way that he uses so many different
Oh
devices
yeah,
to go ahead and
definitely
explain things.
amazing plot devices. Amazing. Um, I just lost the word. Expositionary devices. There we go. Just the ways and the
Yes.
creativity that Robert Jordan thought of to reveal so much of this world he created. It's astounding because you can learn a million different things about one culture a million different ways. Is at least the feeling that you get. I mean, yeah, if you look at actual
Hmm.
numbers, yeah, it's not going to be that because that's ludicrous. But you get the point. You learn so much.
Yes. And of course, each of those have so many different facets
Oh
to
yeah.
them that now
Because you
it's
learn so much
definitely
about
in the
IL
millions.
culture just from what people talk about they've heard and know about IL culture. Then you learn more about it from Perrin's
Correct.
interactions with Gaul, and whenever Nynaeve and Elaine and all them have their interactions with Avienda's group. Um, then
Yes. And the perceived really or like understanding of the relationship between like
yeah,
Fail
and then
and
you
Bane and
get even
Chiad.
more whenever they do cross the Dragon Wall into the Isle Waste. And then you get exposed to the Wise Ones more
Mm-hmm.
so, and everything. And then later on, you get to see you just learn so much more. Like whenever they're put into a city setting where you are now the de facto police military of Tyr, or the de facto military police of Tyrion.
Right.
It's you get to learn so much more, and just how much of a struggle it is for a culture that has lived one way as far as they can remember, now having to trying to live that way in a entirely different atmosphere, climate, location. And beyond those changes, you've got this guy that prophecy has said will come and will save a remnant of a remnant and will lead you across the Dragon Wall, who is changing a lot of your culture actively, continuously. And because of the culture of
Mm-hmm.
honor you have, you cannot say no, though you want to so many times. You can caution and talk about it, but ultimately, if the Karakorn wants it done this way, then within the bounds of his role, it's done that way. So it's
Yes.
it's just incredible to see just the displaying of cultures that we get, and then watching, even if it's just micro changes that those cultures go through. Um, it's so much fun to be introduced to a world and then watch the world actively change, and then be told how the world has changed from the
Yes.
last age, and get some insight in how the
Yep.
world was going to change in the future. I mean, so it's almost like Robert Jordan created three different worlds just by looking at where we're
Oh,
at,
at least,
where it
yeah.
all came from, and a glimpse into where it was going to go, but now could go. I mean, because obviously the stuff that Avienda saw
Yep.
looking forward into the future can still happen technically, but we don't know because of the dragon's piece. There's a it's
Mm-hmm.
strongly implied that a lot of the stuff that she saw isn't going to happen now because everybody's included in the dragon's piece. But
Yes.
you know, it's one of those things that becomes very interesting to speculate on, and I think it's a great way that the series was left off with all of that to speculate on. There was never any real interaction or resolution to what's going on in Sara. There really wasn't a look into much of what's going
Mm-hmm.
on in Trimble King, and there is no after the last battle for us to look and see how the world looks to be going, other than the stuff that we can reasonably surmise, like Elaine rolling over Andor, Lan and Nynaeve rolling over Malkir, rebuilding Malkir, Perrin presumably
Correct.
continuing to roll over the two rivers. And
But that's an interesting thing as well, because of course, I mean, I know that this is now way off topic of the relationships, but I've always thought about that one as far as like, yeah, cool. So he's the Lord of the Two Rivers,
yeah,
sort of, because like people kind of want a lord, and like it's nice to have him make those decisions and whatnot, but he also talks about all the time being like, I feel useless because they come to me and ask me questions, and then I'm like, well, what would you do? And then they say this, and then I'm like, do that, and they're like, great, and then they go do it. So I don't feel like I'm
yeah, and it's
even
funny because
doing
there's also the
anything.
dynamic of Elaine basically
And
saying,
so
there will be no other rulers in Andor and territory. We're not giving up territory, and now it's one of Hubby's best friends that is basically like, I don't want to rule the land. And to be fair, we haven't seen any of your fucking
yeah,
troops and enforcements and even support and help in lifetime. So
well, But this is also very important to know and to note is that at the end of the War of the Shadow, well, really, so at the end of
Yeah.
Tarmangaiden, that's this one. I don't know if they actually give it a name other than Tarmangaiden, as far as like the war
I
that they
imagine it'll
fight
probably
from the
just be
beginning
called
of the books
Tarmogoyf.
on. But anyway, at the something like that, yeah. So at the end of Tarmangaiden, now you have a situation where the White Tower and the Black Tower and the White Tower and the Black Tower both exist. Uh Everyone who uh is a channeler who goes through one of those programs um is knowledgeable about how to travel. Uh the White Tower and Andor have shaken hands because I'm partially because Egwene was the Amerlin seat and she was great friends with Elaine, and presumably whoever they get as Amerlin will not have a good relationship with Elaine because she basically has at least a respectful relationship with everybody else who's currently an Aes Sedai. Um, as well as she herself is an Aes Sedai. So Andor and the White Tower have a presumably very good close relationship. Um, the Black Tower and Rand, who is presumably the king of Andor. I mean, like, obviously, Andor has a queen, so she is the ruler, but he is her husband, presumably. Um, he is the leader of the Black Tower on some level, and so they should have a good relationship. They have set themselves up in a lot of ways to not have the point of all of this is that they have set themselves up to be in a very good position that Morghese, for example, and all of the rulers before her had no ability to even do, which is, Emmons Field at the beginning of these books hasn't seen a tax collector or an Andoran royal soldier in decades, centuries even.
Yeah.
They also couldn't travel in decades or centuries. So I imagine that Andor's reign, and actually probably a lot of other nations, uh, has now gotten a lot easier with the advent of things like traveling, with the advent of things like the power being used to transport goods and trade and firm up borders and things like that. And so certainly we're not talking about, like you get to a sign that says you're now entering Andor on this exact line like we have in the 50 states, because I don't think they're quite to that level of modern society, if you will. I also don't necessarily think they think that's as important, but it is way easier now to deal
Oh
with a
yeah.
lot of
And I
that kind of
think
stuff. So it would actually be more realistic for her to be like, "Hey, I can actually say this with uh gravitas behind it, that there will be no other rulers in Andor, and I
true.
can
And I
enforce
think this
that."
all makes for a very interesting topic where, maybe we do an episode on, the world after the last battle and talk about, where we think the nations are going to
Absolutely.
be.
I'd be down.
We can analyze the dragon's piece in depth. Just talk about the effect that it
Yeah.
potentially could have. And you guys, as the listeners, if that's something you'd like to see us do, an entirely speculative episode on the world after the last battle, a world without the dragon, presumably, um, but with the remnants of what
Yes.
the Dragon Reborn has done, definitely let us know it. I'm not saying we won't do it anyway, because we probably will. We like to do that kind of thing. See if you guys are interested, but then still do it anyway.
Certainly.
But and I think a lot of people are interested.
But if you tell us that you really don't want to see it and that we
We may
shouldn't,
consider
we
not doing
may
it for at least a
consider
little
not
while.
to.
But
Indeed.
yeah, so I think we've covered. Well, we've definitely covered more than Land and Nynaeve, and I think we've covered pretty much everything we can about
Correct.
Lan and Nynaeve, at least everything that I can think of.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure that there are quotes that we're missing and certain things that, you know, have, given that neither of us have photographic memories, there are certainly things I'm sure that we are missing. I mean, nothing major. I think that we've definitely gone over it as far as broad strokes and a number of finer strokes. I don't know if you could say that we went over it with, like, you know, a
oh no.
fine tooth comb or anything. But yeah, no, definitely. I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like we've done it justice. I definitely think that we have talked about the ramifications of their relationship and the not the ramifications. That's not the right word. The particulars. That's what I meant. The particulars of their relationship, definitely down to a
Yeah,
point
I feel
where
pretty
I
good
feel
about
good
we
about
here done did that thing. So indubitably.
it. Indeed.
But yeah. So I think that's everything, right?
But yeah, I think
All
so.
right.
But yeah, uh, as stated before, if you have any feedback for us about that particular topic or just in general, let us know as far as this episode is concerned. Also, you know, we've definitely been getting a number of other comments on other episodes. We'd love to see that. It's super fun to go ahead and know that you guys listen, which is just awesome, and that you guys are actually interested in what we're saying and don't just have it on as background noise. So any responses that you guys have or feedback is more than welcome. It is encouraged. um and definitely, you know, to do that, we say it's every episode, but it's definitely an every episode kind of thing. You can always get a hold of us on our Twitter, which is at Tower Podcast. If you want to do things directly to us, we have an email that's blacktowerpod@gmail.com. We have a Discord server, which is great. That's actually where we get the most comments, I want to say. And we love everybody there. All of you guys are awesome. And we've had so much fun on that Discord server. If you'd like to get an invite, you can either pick up the invite link on the Podbean page, which is where our podcast is hosted, or you can request one on any other medium, and we'll be happy to send it over. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, we'd love to hear from you guys,
Oh yeah.
as I've
As we
said
say
like
every
12 times
episode, we
now.
want to hear what
Um,
you have to say.
but
You know,
it's
we want to hear
also
what you
true.
have to say in whichever medium
Yes,
you feel confident or comfortable or have access to at the moment. Um, never be shy in trying to reach out to us,
confirmed.
however you would like and is possible. Because I mean, if you would like to have my number, that's not going to happen.
Indeed.
So got to be careful with
Also,
like however you want within
yeah,
reason.
that might be a little within reason. Yes. Also, I didn't actually think, or I did actually think. I said that weird. I did actually think about this. I know that we've mentioned it before, but we definitely haven't been mentioning it, you know, ongoing. On our Podbean, we also always include a link for our
Oh,
Minecraft
not anymore.
server that Andrew has been
Yeah,
super
there
kind
was
enough.
nobody
Oh
using it,
no!
so I have
Oh
made the
no!
decision to let it go.
All right, that's
Thing,
fine. Cool.
yeah.
Well then,
Well, no,
edit that
I'll
out
leave it
and
in
we're
so
good.
that I guess people know. So, but we have decided.
That's fair. So if you actually do want to do something like that, and Minecraft isn't the only medium. If anybody has any suggestions on something that they want to do that's another medium, whether it be Minecraft or some, you know, text-based role-playing game that you're really into, that you want, you know, people from the podcast to know about, and whatnot, let us know, because we're happy to, like, at least field lots of different stuff like that. And we're certainly not going to make any promises on just jumping into that uh period. But definitely we'd love to see what you guys are doing and what you guys are interested in doing, and see if it works for the podcast or the fans or whatever, because extra stuff like that just expands the world and the fandom and the enjoyment of everybody in it in so many ways. And so if you guys have a medium that you're really excited about and you want to start one for the Black Tower, we're definitely open to that kind of stuff all the time.
Indeed, we are. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the close of this episode. Hopefully, unlike the end of the Wheel of Time series, we have not left any questions unanswered, other than maybe what the next episode is going to be on. But we always leave that one unanswered. Sometimes even for us.
Typically, yes. There was one time when we actually had a series, and then we knew what we were doing the next week. But or I guess the fans knew. Most of the time we know. I think we've not known.
Most of the time we know, or at least have an idea, or a couple ideas, and we'll decide when we're talking right before recording, ultimately which one we want to go with. Yeah.
Or sometimes after.
But for those of us here at the Black Tower podcast, I have and hopefully will continue to be Andrew.
I have always been, though may not continue to be, Daniel. Who knows?
Surprise. Character rework.
No. No, but thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next week, and have a great one.
Moment, for this feeling to grow. In the shadows, always watching, always running the show. In the tower, you can bring your pain. In the tower, you can feel the strain. You've been having so much trouble just fitting